Hi guys, this week we're going to talk about yarn. So last week we talked about where the raw fibers of textiles come from. But before we can make those raw fibers into textiles or fabrics, we need to spin them into yarn. So yarns are needed for knit and woven fabrics. So both knit and woven fabrics are created by either looping or weaving together yarns. And here you can see in these close-up versions of a woven fabric and a knit fabric, the small yarns that make up each one of them. Now yarns are not used for all different textiles. There are certain textiles that do not need yarns to make them. Examples of them are leather, either synthetic or real, vinyl, and fur. Now, there are some synthetic versions of leather and fur that have a woven backing that do use yarns. Yarn is also not needed for felt. Felt is a little bit of an oddball, and we'll talk a little bit more about it when we get to the wool section. But felt is made from wool fiber that has been pressed, agitated, and heated to form a mat. At no point is this fiber first spun into a yarn. The raw material is processed directly into the fabric, and this is a rather exceptional case. It's not true for most other wool fabrics, and it's not true for any cotton or silk fabrics. The wool fiber can be pressed into many different shapes and does not have a grain, and it does not fray. You're probably most used to seeing felt as used for crafts, as you can see in these crafty little felt squares here, but it's also used commercially, most notably for hats. So you can see this is a wool felt hat. It's a very peculiar shape, but it is lacking any seams. This is very difficult to find anywhere else, and it's because the fiber can be pressed or molded into that shape without having to become yarn or woven first. So now that we know what yarn is not used for, let's go into how it is made and what it is used for. So like we talked about last week, different fibers are harvested from different things in order to be spun into yarn, and then that yarn will be either knit or woven to make textiles. Here are some images of our raw fibers ready to become yarn. Up here we have cotton, wool, silk, poly, which is short for polyester, nylon, and rayon. Of course, there are more than these, as we talked about last week, but these are some of the main raw fibers that are spun into yarn. Traditionally, yarn was spun from fiber using a spinning wheel or similar piece of technology. Now, this is not relevant today, but it gives a nice visual on the concept of what's going on when we spin yarn. If we went directly to the industrial machines, it's rather complicated, and you don't get the sort of basic idea of what's happening. So as you can see here, we have the raw fiber. This is probably some wool. And these fibers are being twisted by the spinning of this wheel and of this little spindle here to wrap the individual fibers together. And as they wrap and twist, they create this little yarn. As you can see, this woman is spinning some wool into a wool yarn. Now, yarn is spun on industrial machines. Like I said, it's a rather much more complicated process, but it gives us much higher quality yarns that have a standardized strength and width, and all other characteristics are either enhanced or standardized. These are all small snippets of a spinning process of acrylic fiber into yarn. Chronologically, we see it start here as the raw fiber in this large vat. The raw fiber is being sucked up through the hose, and it will run along a pipe into a machine like this, which draws out the raw fiber into a sort of fluffy tube. This will make it easier to feed into the spinning mechanisms. But before it gets spun proper, an additional structural help will be implemented by these rollers. These rollers are pressing and sort of compacting the fibers down together. This is done several times before the actual spinning process. Once the pressed sleeves or tubes are ready, they will go ahead and be spun into yarn and placed onto spools or bolts. In all cases, fiber is twisted or spun tightly to form yarns. The direction the fibers are spun create two different types of yarn, a Z-twist yarn and an S-twist yarn. S-twist yarns are spun in a clockwise direction. Z-twist yarns are spun in a counterclockwise direction. The name comes from the direction the spirals in the yarn or the twists in the yarn create when looked at. The S-twist yarns look like the inner part of an S coming down, wrapping around the yarn. The Z-twist yarns look like a Z coming down and wrapping around the yarn. So how tightly a yarn is spun will affect its characteristics. Now these images are of different yarns twisted at either higher or lower twists. So the twist of a yarn is typically measured by this abbreviation here, twists per inch. Now that's an imperial metric because we in America use inch, but typically a TPI or a TPCM, twist per centimeter, or twist per whatever unit of length you would like to use, is used to measure how tightly a yarn is twisted. Of course, the more twists per inch, the higher or more tightly a yarn is being spun. The fewer twists per inch is a lower or more loosely spun yarn. Here we have images of a yarn being twisted from looser to tighter twists. Here is the loosest, where's my mouse? Here is the loosest yarn or the lowest twists per inch. As we can see here, this twist coming around, we're really only seeing even one twist in this image. Down here is a slightly higher twist, still fairly loose. We can only see maybe two twists in this image. Now here is, I'm sorry about that, is a higher twist. We're seeing many more twists in that frame, and here's probably the highest twist yarn we have shown here. Now remember these images because they're going to make more sense when we talk about the different characteristics of high or low twist yarns. When we look at our high twist yarns, they're smoother and have more luster. They are also stiffer and harder. They are less absorbent but are also stronger. High twist yarns are more resistant to abrasion and pilling. Now if some of those words seem a little confusing, don't worry, we're going to go into them more in detail in the subsequent slides. Low twist yarns are yarns that are loosely spun. They are hairier, as you can see here. They have these little guys sort of coming off, where we have fewer of them over here. They will also have a furrier feel as a consequence. They are soft and limped, and low twist yarns are more absorbent but are more prone to pilling and wear.